Imagine walking through a city bigger than London in the year 800. 60-foot pyramids tower above the jungle canopy. Markets overflow with jade, cacao, obsidian blades, and jaguar pelts. Priests track the stars with a precision that won't be matched for another 700 years. Farmers feed millions using irrigation systems carved into limestone rock. Children play a brutal ball game in stone quartz, while their fathers debate trade routes that stretch from the highlands of Guatemala to the shores of the Caribbean. See, this is the world of the Maya. Not one empire, but a constellation of over 40 city-states spread across what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. At its peak, somewhere between the years 250 and 800, this civilization was home to as many as 10 million people. Some scholars push that number even higher, to 19 million. Either way, the scale was staggering. The city of Tikal alone had a population somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000. Its pyramids climbed over 200 feet into the sky. Its rival, Calakmul, was equally enormous, with 50,000 residents packed into a sprawling metropolis connected by stone causeways to cities. As far as El Mirador and Nakbi, these were not primitive villages. The Maya had a fully developed writing system, the only true writing system in the pre-Columbian Americas. They had a calendar so precise, it tracked cycles spanning millions of years. They understood the concept of 0 centuries before European mathematicians adopted it. They mapped the movements of Venus with astonishing accuracy. Their architecture, their art, their political systems, all of it would have been recognizable to any Roman or Chinese scholar as the work of a great civilization. And then, over the span of roughly 150 years, it all fell apart. City after city went silent. The great plazas of Tikal, Palenque, Copán, and Calakmul, places that had echoed with ceremonies, sacrifices, and royal proclamations for 500 years, were slowly swallowed by the jungle. The last dated monument at Tikal was carved in the year 869. At Calakmul, the final inscription dates to 909. By the year 1000, the southern lowlands, once the beating heart of Maya civilization, were almost completely empty. Millions of people had simply vanished from the landscape. Where did they go? What happened? This is one of the oldest and greatest mysteries in all of human history. And the truth, as it turns out, is far more complicated and far more terrifying than anyone first imagined. To understand what killed the Maya, you first have to understand what made them powerful. And the answer is surprisingly simple. Water. The Maya lived in a region with no rivers running through most of the southern lowlands. There were no great lakes to draw from, no underground springs easily accessible to the surface. Everything depended on rain. The wet season ran roughly from May to October. During those months, the skies opened up and dumped enough water to fill the enormous reservoirs the Maya had carved out of limestone bedrock. These reservoirs were engineering marvels. At Tikal, the water system could supply roughly 10,000 people for up to 18 months. Every drop was precious. When the rain came, crops flourished. Maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers fed the population. Cacao was cultivated for the elites, and the beans were so valuable they were used as currency. The surplus from good harvests fueled trade, which funded construction, which employed workers, which strengthened the king's power. It was a beautiful interlocking system. But it had one fatal weakness. It only worked when the rain fell on time, every single year. If the wet season failed even once, the consequences rippled outward. Crops withered, reservoirs ran low, food prices spiked, trade slowed, and the people started asking a dangerous question. Why isn't the king keeping the gods happy? Because here is the thing about Maya politics that most people don't realize. The king wasn't just a political leader. He was a divine figure. The Maya believed their rulers had a direct connection to the gods. When the king performed the right rituals, When he spilled his own blood in elaborate piercing ceremonies, the gods sent rain. When the king was powerful and just, the world was in balance. So when the rain stopped, it wasn't just a weather problem. It was a spiritual crisis. It meant the king had failed. Now let's rewind and look at what was happening politically, because the Maya world was never peaceful. It was a war zone. For centuries, two superpowers dominated the lowlands, Tikal and Calakmul. Think of them like Cold War America and the Soviet Union. They didn't just fight each other directly. They built vast networks of allies, played smaller cities against each other, launched proxy wars, and engaged in a level of political scheming that would make any modern diplomat nervous. The rulers of Calakmul called themselves the Lords of the Snake. Their emblem glyph, a serpent head, became a symbol of fear across the entire region. And in the 6th century, the Snake Kings made their move. A ruler known as Stone-Hand Jaguar spent decades quietly building alliances, flipping Tikal's allies one by one. He turned the cities of Naranjo, El Pur, and Karakol against Tikal. He surrounded it. And then, on April 29th of the year 562, Calakmul and its allies attacked. They sacked Tikal. They killed its king, Wakchan Kayawil. And they plunged Tikal into a dark age that lasted 130 years. For over a century, Tikal barely erected a single monument, no new temples, no inscriptions celebrating victories. Silence. Historians call this the Tikal hiatus. It was as if one of the world's greatest cities had simply gone to sleep. But Tikal wasn't dead. It was waiting. In 682, a new king rose to power, Jesa Chankawil I. He was brilliant, ruthless, and determined to restore Tikal's glory. For 13 years, he rebuilt his army, forged new alliances, and planned his revenge. Then, in 695, he struck. Imagine a civilization so advanced they developed their own writing, created an incredibly accurate calendar, and built towering pyramids that rival those in Egypt, all deep within the heart of the jungle. This was the world of the Maya. For centuries, they flourished, creating a network of powerful city-states across Mesoamerica. But then, almost overnight, it all vanished. What happened to the Maya? The story of their collapse isn't a simple one. It's a perfect storm of multiple factors brewing over time. At their peak, Maya cities were bustling metropolises, but this success came at a cost. Overpopulation put immense strain on their resources. To feed everyone and build their magnificent temples, they cleared vast areas of forest. This large-scale deforestation had a devastating effect on their environment, leading to soil erosion and making the land less fertile. Then came the wars. The once cooperative city-states turned on each other. Constant conflict drained their resources, disrupted trade routes, and created widespread instability. People were no longer safe in their cities, and the very social fabric that held their civilization together began to unravel. The final devastating blow was climate change. Scientists have found evidence of a prolonged and severe drought that struck the region for nearly a century. With their forests gone, the land couldn't retain moisture, and the drought hit them with full force. Their reservoirs dried up, crops failed, and famine swept across the land. The gods they worshipped for rain seemed to have abandoned them. Faced with war, starvation, and a failing environment, the Maya people made a drastic choice. They abandoned their cities. The magnificent stone temples and palaces were left to be reclaimed by the jungle, their populations scattering into smaller, more sustainable villages. So, the Maya didn't disappear entirely. Their descendants still live in the region today, carrying on their rich cultural heritage. But the collapse of their great classical civilization serves as a powerful reminder of how even the most brilliant societies are vulnerable when they fail to live in balance with their environment. It's a lesson from history that remains incredibly relevant for us today. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of the past. See you next time. In the Palenque region, warfare destroyed the city of Dos Pilas around 761. Its people literally tore apart their own temples to build defensive walls and abandoned the city anyway. In Tikal, the population gradually concentrated closer and closer to the city center as the surrounding countryside emptied out before the city itself finally went silent. In Copán, in the southeast, the last king erected his final monument in 822, and then the dynasty simply ended. At Palenque, in the west, the great palace complex that had been home to Tikal the Great's descendants was left to the jungle. The collapse spread like dominoes, from west to east and south to north, over the course of more than a century. Some cities died violently, others just faded away. But the northern cities told a different story. While the south was collapsing, places like Chichen Itza and Uxmal actually flourished for a time. The Palenque region in the northern Yucatan experienced a building boom in the 9th century, right as the southern cities were dying. Chichen Itza became a major power with its famous pyramid of Kukulkan, its enormous ball court, and its sacred cenote. Some researchers believe the northern cities survived longer because they had access to the coast and therefore to maritime trade. Others point to the natural cenotes, limestone sinkholes filled with groundwater that provided water even when the rain failed. Whatever the reason, the north bought itself an extra century or two. But eventually, the droughts caught up with them too. The mega-drought that began around 1021 was simply too much. Now here's the part that most people get wrong about this story. The Maya didn't disappear. Not really. When we say 10 million people vanished, what we mean is that the political system collapsed. The cities were abandoned. The kings stopped ruling. The monuments stopped being carved. The great ceremonies ended. The trade networks broke apart. But the people? Many of them survived. They scattered into smaller communities. They moved to the coast. They migrated north. They went back to simpler forms of farming. They kept speaking their languages, kept practicing their rituals, kept passing down their knowledge from generation to generation. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 1500s, they found Maya people living all across the Yucatan. The last independent Maya city, Najpitan, didn't fall to the Spanish until 1697, nearly 800 years after the classic collapse. And today, more than 7 million people in Central America speak Maya languages. They are the direct descendants of the people who built Tikal and Calakmul and Palenque. The Maya didn't vanish. Their empire did. And that distinction matters, because the story of the Maya is not just a story about the past. It's a warning about the future. Think about what happened. A civilization that had thrived for over 1,000 years pushed its environment to the breaking point. They cut down their forests. They overpopulated their land. They fought wars that drained their resources. And when the climate shifted, when the rain stopped coming, they had no buffer left. No margin for error. No way to absorb the shock. The Maya were not fools. They were among the most brilliant people who ever lived. They understood their environment better than almost any ancient civilization. They built water systems that sustained millions. They tracked the stars with a precision we still admire. And still, they couldn't stop themselves from destroying the very foundation their civilization was built on. One of the researchers who studied this collapse put it perfectly. The Maya created a disturbed environment, one in which the very things that had made them successful, their agriculture, their cities, their population growth, became the instruments of their downfall. They knew what they were doing. They could see the forests disappearing, the soil degrading, the water levels dropping. But the system had too much momentum. Too many people needed too many resources. No single king could reverse it. No single city could fix it alone. And so, city by city, generation by generation, one of the greatest civilizations in human history faded into the jungle. The pyramids still stand. The inscriptions can still be read. The descendants still walk the same land. But the world the Maya built, that world of 40 cities and 10 million souls, of jade masks and star charts and blood rituals under the tropical moon, that world is gone. And the jungle, patient and relentless, took it all back.